Welcome to Jung at Harp. This is episode number 111, and today we're going to be talking about gifts and challenges. I'm Kathleen Wiley, a Jungian psychoanalyst in North Carolina, and I am here with Deborah Henson-Conant, a composer, mentor, coach, and harpist. And we both play the harp, and that's why we call this Jung at Harp. This is one of a series of conversations that Deborah and I began, a few years ago, where we come together with a question that we have, not answers, but a question that we want to explore that's pertinent both to our life day to day as well as to our play as harpists and musicians. So we would invite you to join in the conversation. We're live on YouTube, and there's a place you can put in comments, and sometimes we can see them while we're live and sometimes we can't, but feel free to jump in. And DHC, I'm going to let you take the ball.
Sure. So when we started talking this morning, I told you about a revelation that I had today, that we come into the world with a gift. And then I was thinking an obstacle or a disease or something that challenges us. And you described that, in fact, this is not a new idea. And so I was excited to hear about that. But in my thinking, I was thinking we come in with these two things, and the way these two things relate to each other, this is how life happens. So the gift is there. We just have that gift. And then there's the obstacle or the challenge or the disease or whatever it is that holds us. I would call it a condition, some kind of condition that our lives are. And that holds us back in a sense. Maybe some of it holds us back. I don't know. But the interplay of these two things, this orb, this gift, and then the conditions or the challenge. And I want to talk about that because I have a feeling that's what life is. That's our experience of life. And I bet that you have run into this a lot and know something about it that I haven't thought of.
Yeah, and I'm sure you can tell me some things too that will help. You know, when we first started talking about this, my mind went to the very first reading I had with my Vedic astrologer. And the system of astrology that he practices is called Asterian astrology. And in my birth chart reading, part of what he tells you is the gift you were born with and the challenge for this life. And I have found that that's been so true for me. And from a psychological point of view, there's always going to be this question of, is it nature versus nurture? Is this just the way someone's born, their temperament, the hardwiring, or is it a result of nurture? And I think in truth, it's an intersection. It's kind of what the physicist David Bohm talks about, the implicate and explicate order. It's all interconnected. It's like holographic, so we can't say it's all this or it's all that. So we really can't talk about our gifts without also talking about the gift of our challenge or the challenge of our gift, because they both bring opportunities where we bump up against the limits of our sense of self, whether it's our sense of self as a person in the world or our sense of self as a musician. And we have to find a way to hold on to the gift when we meet the limit of the challenge.
Well, you also said something when we first talked, is you said that what you end up discovering is the gift of the challenge.
Yes. Yeah. That if we believe through whatever spiritual philosophy we may have, that there is an ongoing evolution of consciousness within humanity as a whole, and that part of our individual call and contribution to that is what we make of our consciousness. Do we grow and expand our sense of self, our ability to be present, our ability to effectively engage with the outer world, our understanding of both ourself and the outer, or do we stay in a very closed, small system where nothing changes? And if we look to nature, we know that nothing stands still. Everything is always in motion and constantly changing. So in some ways, part of the work is how do we meet that challenge in a way to find what is the gift that's within it? what is it that it's really offering us? I don't mind. My challenge is an overactive mind. Well, man, does not work with me being a lifelong student and a psychoanalyst and having hordes of books. I can remember dating a man who said, "Oh, you are an academic. You're a scholar." I'm like, "I'm not an academic or a scholar." He said, "Look at all these books, and they're the centerpiece of your living room." My overactive mind wants that. So I've been able to go into a field of work where that serves me well, because ideas, understanding, thought processes.
Yeah, I mean, I've been thinking about this a lot. I didn't realize that this is one thing I was thinking about until what you just said. But, I'm aware that I'm getting older and I've been this like massive content creator my whole life, but not a massive content sharer. So, and although, I mean, what I finally discovered how to do was to share what I had come up with by just going out and performing, because one of my challenges has always been the documentation of what I do, or like I could create a story and a show, but getting it from the imagination and my ability to do it, and getting it to that next step where somebody else can do it. That has been the difficulty. And so it's become that challenge became this beautiful, amazing adventure of my life,
Right.
because such difficulty doing that made it so that I had to become the musical, or I had to become the thing on stage, which then led to the development of the DHC harp, because I needed an instrument that could partner with me in that way. It came just directly out of my challenge. But as I get older and I realize I wrote every one of these things, in my mind, I was creating it for others to perform. Because one of the things I saw when I came into the world with a mother and an aunt who were performers, who were powerful, amazing performers, and very dynamic, large women, I saw them not getting roles and so I'm not getting the opportunity for an audience to actually see the power that I saw, simply because whoever wrote that piece of music or that play or that opera envisioned the women in a different way. They didn't envision, so there was no place for these women. And so I committed as a child, I will write music, I will create music that is where, the size of a person, the age of a person, the body type of a person, it doesn't matter. I'm writing something for the story. We can talk about that another time, but the point is that I realized the other day that what I'm engaged in now, by taking the Golden Cage, this musical, and putting it into the world, because it does fulfill all those, it can be done by any gender, any size, it's a story that I am finally figuring out how to get past that challenge and actually put it into the world. And I see what can happen. Yes, it will be a film that anyone in the world can see, but the impact of that film is that any theater company, any opera company, any great performer can see that and say, hey, I want to do that. And they can. And then that empowers them, and it empowers the theater, and then that empowers the community. And it just means so much. And that was my goal. But the challenge all along was how to get beyond my limitations to be able to actually share that to the world. And I think that that's a universal, not just me. I mean, it's a universal, how do I get beyond my to be able to share that thing that I've created, that I've been given to bring to the world?
Yeah, no, I'm with you, because it's one thing to be present in the moment and express that energy. And then it's another thing to somehow grab hold of that energy with our mind and our heart and gut, and then somehow put it into a structure, a form where other people can access it.
Yeah, I'm thinking, as you said that, I'm thinking about a recipe book. until there was a recipe book. I don't even know who made the first whatever. And it like that empowered so many people,
Right.
or the dictionary or the thesaurus,
Right.
you know, the work that somebody did to make it accessible to other humans, to empower other humans. And that's where I feel is my challenge right now is, and it has been all my life, but now I'm more conscious of it, is that challenge that or obstacle or disease, you know, whatever it is that's inhibited me or made me think I didn't have whatever, you know, whatever. I mean, and I hear this all the time. So for example, for me, it's like, well, it just takes so long to do that. I guess I'm just really bad at it. Maybe I'm really bad at writing it out, but I hear people all the time say that as players,
Right.
they just don't understand how long it takes, how long you need to be bad before that opens up. And, you know, for some reason, I was able to have a huge tolerance for being bad for a long time in playing, and have no tolerance for an inability to, you know, ace something in terms of documentation.
Yeah, I'm thinking what you're saying makes me think about the overwhelm. And we've talked about that before, that, you know, that question of what is it that makes one thing overwhelming and another thing not, even though the same, and my guess is somewhere being bad on the harp didn't trigger shame, but being, quote, bad at this other thing triggered shame. At least that would be true for me. You know, that somewhere part of the overwhelm that stops me, that where the challenge gets hijacked by self-hatred, is when I start to feel shame about it, versus if the challenge is something that's just a part of my finding my way, my ability to make my own relationship to that thing.
It's interesting because I'm thinking about it as you say it.
Yeah.
I'm thinking back, and I remember, you know, throwing myself on the floor and with the harp and thinking, why do I have to try it? Why do I have to work twice as hard as everybody else to be half as good? And yet I kept doing it. But there was physical activity with it, so it felt there, and that was important. And that in terms of writing things out, some of the things that really inhibited me were when people would be like, and this happens to this day, because apparently I conceive of things that is hard to write out. People would be like, well, that's not what you wrote. And just feeling so frustrated as I hand it on. And so I thought, if I get on stage and I just show people, this is how it would be. This is what you would do. But I get it. You still have to make the recipe so that people can follow it for themselves and be empowered.
Yeah, it's making me think about how John has his own method of banjo tablature. And, you
This
know,
is your husband.
My husband, John. Yeah. And he has a good friend who's a musician and teacher. And when she started learning the banjo and she saw his tablature, she was like, this makes sense to me. All this other tablature and these banjo books over here make no sense to me. And then they set about trying to figure out how to adapt to be able to create it in Finale, which has been a little bit of a nightmare, actually, to make something, to do something in a form that's not standard.
So Finale being the music writing
program.
Correct.
So as you're talking, I'm thinking about how whenever we do experience an expansion of consciousness for ourselves, whether it's in our music or it's in our life, we want to make a habit change, we want to be in a different kind of relationship, then there isn't often a standard form for how we get there. And so part of the opportunity and the challenge and the gift is that we not let the lack of a currently existing structure.
I'm just laughing. I'm laughing because my next meeting this morning is with the Legacy Project, which is a group of people who are helping me write out all the music, you know, classical harpists and others who are helping me. And let's see if I can do this. Let's see. Okay, so this is what we're trying to write out. And it's sometimes different, but it's based, I don't know if you can, hopefully you can hear this. It's something like this. It starts out very low. So like this is the thing.
Right.
How do you write that out?
Right.
There is no standard notation. It's might be slightly different each time. Certain, I mean, that's within it because it's dependent on how you were playing the thing before it, how you might start it. And I think that's one of the reasons I love working with a team now. I'm working with a team to write out my music. People who are able to say, that doesn't make sense to me, or how about we try it this way, instead of just me putting it out there and people are like, well, that doesn't work, or me, writing out something and then people playing it in a way that's not what I meant. And that anyway, so coming back to the gift and the challenge.
Yeah.
So you're saying that John found a way to, with pen and paper, create that thing, the recipe, whatever is that thing between I can do it and here's how you can do it.
Right. That's right.
So he found a way to create a tablature. Great. And then in order to make it on a larger scale that can be shared with anybody and that others can actually use that same tablature, now he runs into the challenge that the standard way of notation is not set up for this new idea.
That's right. That's right. It's like the set programs available to musicians don't allow for this easily.
And yet I gotta say, what they made possible was that I could write for symphony orchestra and have a huge opportunity to play with symphonies all over the world, my own original music, because this software bridged that gap for me that I couldn't bridge for myself. So it creates both a bridge and a whoa, okay, so now I'm thinking about the golden cage in a sense. I'm thinking that place that keeps us apart keeps us apart and is also a challenge that lets us break through. Okay, and now my brain is like all over the place. Okay, bring us back, Kathleen.
Yeah, but I want to circle back. You make a good point because his friend did figure out a very complex series of steps to be able to create this tablature within Finale, but it's very, very time consuming. It's not straightforward. It's not direct.
Right.
And so one of the points I think you're making, and I think this is important, is that we don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater, so to speak. That, when we have a structure or a standard template, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's of no use. It just may mean we're going to have to get creative in our relationship to it and our exploration of it.
I just got to say, sometimes the bathwater gets really gross.
Yeah, well, throw out the bathwater, but not the baby.
Right. Right. It kind of goes back to that experience that I had of being in a symphony orchestra early on in my career, before I was like, I'm not going to be in the back of the symphony orchestra. By gum, I'm going to write the symphony and get in the front. But before then, when I was just learning, I was aware that other players, first of all, they'd spent their whole lives learning how to play their instrument. They also had a single note that they were playing, one note after a time, and they were playing music that had been written by composers who could probably play their instrument, and so were writing, effectively for their instrument. So those were the conditions that I came in, fair or not fair. And so I came in as someone who was just learning how to read music as an adult, a person with a very sophisticated musical mind, but complete illiteracy with music. So coming in, trying to learn how to read, playing an instrument that's much harder, and playing music that wasn't written by someone. And so my experience was, I'm seeing all these people around me, like they don't have to practice. They come into the rehearsal and they just play beautifully. I practice for hours and hours and hours and hours. And then I come into the rehearsal and I forget my entrance, like I can barely do it. And that experience it's really daunting. And I think I didn't have it as a child because I was doing things that I was naturally good at. It took me to be an adult to get into the situation where I was doing something I was not naturally good at. And it is really daunting.
Yeah. No, I'm feeling that with you. It is daunting. I mean, for me, it's like, I feel like I'm the sore thumb, it's like I'm the one sticking out.
Right.
But one of the things that I'm aware of, and when we're talking about gifts and challenges, and if we talk about the evolution of consciousness, and from a Jungian perspective, if we talk about individuation, which means living into our fullness, embodying our wholeness, then in some ways, that situation and your ability to tolerate the discomfort, and to the ability to let yourself throw yourself on the floor when you needed to and rail, and then get back up behind the harp, allowed you to find a way to interface with the outside world and the environment of the larger musical world. And that was important, that you didn't want to be over here and not have a way to interface over here. And, sometimes we have to remember we don't know what we don't know. And we're all a product of our environment. And what gifts growing up, and the way that you came into music, and your mother, who was a singer, and your family gave you that, lots of people who worked and enslaved would love to have that innate fire and that trust in it. And so there's something important, I think, as we navigate with our gifts and challenges, that it's also, how do we bring our gift to bear on our challenge? And how can the challenge thus empower our gift? Which is what you're talking about. You were willing to suffer the discomfort, the sense of sticking out, like my word, the sore thumb, in order to be able that your gifts would become more accessible and thus have more impact.
Well, yeah. And as you're talking, I'm really realizing something here, which is because you started talking about the gift of the challenge itself. So this challenge was being, this real discomfort and not knowing how to write out things. It's certainly not in a standard way. And so the gift was to be able to, I was able to self-express, and I could move beyond this in self-expressing. But I realized that the real gift of the challenge, the deep gift of the challenge, was not in self-expression, but in the ability to pass on.
That's right.
And it was by learning how to break things down, because I was so incapable of reading. To this day, I can't read music in the standard form. It's just not my language. And that's how I learned to read, to play in patterns, which is now what I teach, is patterns, and learn how to find, what's the same rather than what, so that I can identify. And that is what I realized. That's my recipe. Right. That I'm able to pass on to other people. And I'm beginning to realize, as you speak, is the challenge is the thing that then allows you to pass on to others. You can pass on your gift. Hello, I'm amazing in some way, or, whatever. I wrote a book, I did this, I did, but to pass on the ability to self-express to others, yes, comes from your challenge.
That's exactly right. You're absolutely right. And our willingness to engage with that, letting our gift be an asset as we come to the challenge, because the challenge of the gift is wanting to blow off the other way. I mean,
right.
That's so in some ways, the two have to learn to love each other and inform each other so that something that really partakes of both is born, which is what you're doing with the Legacy project and having this team. It's what you did when you did Invention and Alchemy, and the conductor, whomever, said, oh, we've got to get this in a different musical form. And he said, I know someone who can do that in terms of the written part.
Oh, right.
Yeah. You know, you've been willing to get feedback, get input, and you've not collapsed. I mean, I think
I want to go back to I want to go back to John, what John did with finding a new, because I'm thinking that this real gift of passing on the ability to self-express to others comes from taking that challenge. Like he saw the challenge of, here's this notation, it just doesn't make sense to me.
Right.
I'm making a new notation that does make sense to me.
Right.
And then I'm passing that on to others so that they can, so that music can become more fluent in the world. Because that, when you talked about the, not just a single person's development and self-expression, but you talked about as a consciousness, as a full consciousness, as human, that's the challenge that we're really working on, especially in a later part of our lives. I think we often don't even, that's not meaningful to us, but as we get older, that starts to open up to us.
Yeah, it's like recognizing that how do we change the world? We change ourselves, and then we change one person at a time. How do you impact music in a larger way? Is you teach how you approach music, because you're an extraordinarily gifted musician. Anyone who hears you or sees you knows that. So for you to be able to say, I don't read music to do that. This is what I've learned to do. I look at patterns. I practice patterns. That's empowering to a lot of people who also are not, whether it's hardwired or conditioned, to read music in the standard form. And so it's a contribution.
Because if you feel that you don't have a way in, then you don't have the opportunity to express yourself in this thing, which is a God-given, whatever given. It's a gift to be able to combine language with sound and to be part of, I mean, it's an incredible gift to be able to express music, not good, not bad, not famous, not whatever, but just the act. Like people, my other grandmother, she said, people have to sing. They got to go to the bathroom, they got to eat their peas, and they got to sing. It's just a thing they got to do.
I love it.
And so you're really helping me see what I'm getting out of today. I just really never saw what the challenge was so clearly in my mind, that it was this thing of not knowing how to engage with the standard notation. And what that challenge has given me in my life that I'm able to give to others. So when I leave, that's still here. And not just there as like a recording, but they're in other people in the way they engage with the world, which will become things that I would never have done.
Yes. And then that will trickle out and more people are influenced. You know, I'm so aware of our time that we're going to have to bring today to a close. But I think this is a good place to close, that when we realize that part of what being willing to meet our challenge with the fullness we can muster and get support from within as well as outside people, that allows our gift to flow out in the world in a way that makes greater impact and ultimately shifts consciousness, ultimately allows humanity as a whole to become more embodied, more self-expressive, more creative, and I would say more human, and that we make more room for each other in different ways. We all don't have to be the same or do it the same way, that there are many ways, and that's okay. Not only is that okay, but that's part of the gift of life. Yeah.
Thank you. So what I'm taking away from today that I'm going to put into practice is look at all the ways in which I'm struggling, that I do have a challenge, in which I'm trying to do it the way I think I'm supposed to do it, and try to open that up to other possibilities. Could I create another, what will work for me? Just like with John coming up with a different standard of notation, different way of notation.
Yeah.
And so I really want to look more at the gift and the gift of the challenge.
Yes.
And Kathleen, thank you so much. This was just such a wonderful opportunity to get to look at this with you today. And I'm
Yeah.
looking forward to next time as well. Thank
Okay.
you. And thank you everyone who joined us. And we look forward to seeing you again next week for episode number 111.